I am calling today's special session on Tuesday, August 31st, 2021. Calling this special session to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Rallo, not quite here yet. Councilmember Volin?
Here.
Rosenbarger?
Here.
Gambaluri?
Here.
Sims?
Here.
Flaherty?
Here.
Piedmont Smith?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Sandberg?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. The agenda summation is as follows. There will be consideration of prepared amendments to ordinances 17-09 through 17-15 and ordinance 17-17. These are ordinances of the city of Bloomington, Monroe County, Indiana, annexing territory to the city of Bloomington, placing the same within the corporate boundaries thereof, and making the same a part of the city of Bloomington. We will go or listen to the the amendments that we have this evening. And I'll address those in just one second. Well, let's go down the line. We have on the first of the agenda, Amendment 02, which is brought forth by staff. This provides for the creation of the Southwest A Bloomington Annexation Impoundment Fund, and a related Southwest A Bloomington Annexation Advisory Board. That was Ordinance 17-09. Ordinance 17-12, which is Area 2, Southeast of Bloomington Annexation. B, we'll have Amendment 02, which is a removal of identified parcels from Southeast Bloomington Annexation area near Rogers Road and Smith Road, and C, map attached to the agenda, to the amendment. Then the next one will be C, Amendment 3. This is a removal of identified parcels from Southeast Bloomington Annexation area near State Road 46, Laurie Lane, and Ridgewood Drive. See map attachment to an amendment. Next, Amendment D, which will be Amendment 04. It's a removal of identified parcels from the Southeast Bloomington Annexation area south of State Road 46 and east of State Road 446. See map attached to amendment. And lastly, we'll have Amendment 05, and this is brought forth by staff, which is to provide for the creation of the Southeast Bloomington Annexation Impoundment Fund and a related Southeast Bloomington Annexation Advisory Board. Then we will deal with matters concerning the council schedule before we have adjournment for the evening. Okay, and before we get started, if we have no objections, as listed on the agenda, Amendment 02, which is under 3A, I would like to move it to the bottom of the list so that we will, Amendment 02 brought staff and Amendment 05 brought staff, both dealing with the Annexation Impoundment Fund. I would like to just discuss those together at the end, and we'll do the other three first. If there's no objections.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just to clarify, you're talking about Amendment 2 to Ordinance 1709?
Yes.
Okay. And there are 4 amendments to Ordinance 1712. You said there were only 3?
I'm sorry, no, there's 4.
Okay, so you're talking about moving Amendment 2 to Ordinance 1709 to after the other 4?
Correct.
Thank you, that clarifies. Thank you.
Thank you. That'll, both of those are impoundment funds related, and I think it'd be better served to do them one after the other. Okay, thank you. Do we have any objections to that? Okay, thank you. Seeing none. Also, with regarding structure of debate, in our previous meetings, we have had council members debate limited to 3 minutes for questions and comments. And that will include multiple rounds. And we have also been limiting public comment to 2 minutes. And I would like to continue that if we have no objections. Okay, thank you all. Seeing none, the first item on the agenda is Amendment 02 of Ordinance 17-12, and that is sponsored by Councilmember Scamboluri.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Do we need a motion to introduce first?
Councilmember Flaherty, yes, we do.
Yeah, I believe that would be best. I would like to move that Ordinance 17-12 be introduced and read by the clerk by title and synopsis only.
Second?
Thank you. Been properly moved and second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Volin,
Yes.
Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scamboluri,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And that motion passes 8-0. And I'll check with Mr. Our parliamentarian. Is it now time to just move to the sponsor?
I believe we're just ready for the clerk to read by title and synopsis first, and then we can go ahead and move into amendments. Yes.
Thank you. I was waiting for you, sir. I'm sorry. Will the clerk please read? Thank you.
Ordinance 17-12, an ordinance of the City of Bloomington, Monroe County, Indiana, annexing territory to the City of Bloomington, placing the same within the corporate boundaries thereof, and making the same a part of the City of Bloomington, Southeast Bloomington annexation. The synopsis is as follows. Upon adoption, this ordinance would take various steps necessary for the annexation of the Southeast Bloomington annexation area, which is depicted in Exhibit A and attached to this ordinance. In the course of proposing the annexation of this area, the city prepared a written fiscal plan for municipal annexation that describes the proposed provision of both non-capital and capital services to the annexation territory and was adopted via Resolution 1719. The approval of an amendment to the written fiscal is scheduled for consideration at a common council session on May 19th, 2021, with the understanding that the fiscal plan is subject to further amendment as part of the ongoing process of annexation review by the city. The next step in this ongoing process will be the conducting of public hearings on the proposed annexation, which are scheduled for Wednesday, August 4th. Note, at the May 19th, 2021 regular session, the council adopted Amendment 1 to Ordinance 17-12, which changed various date references and signature lines to bring the proposed ordinance forward to 2021 so that it will be properly considered by the Common Council. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay. And Mr. President, if I may, I'd like to move Amendment 2 to Ordinance 17-12.
Second.
Thank you. Been properly moved and seconded. Councilmember Scamboluri, will you please present?
Yes, thank you. And if I may, Mr. Lucas, could you please screen share the map of this area to start us out? And let me actually preface by saying I appreciate the work done by administration and particularly staff in thinking through the areas that may make sense for annexation and for all the work they've done to prepare us for this. I do think annexation is a very natural part of the evolution of a city. And in my case, this amendment and the one of which I am a part next are basically minor refinements, I think, to a map rather than wholesale changes. So I would just offer that thought. These parcels, and Mr. Lucas, if you could kind of cursor over just so, these parcels are at the southeast corner of Rogers Road and Smith Road at this bend. They are privately owned. They have been part of the county for quite some time. They are not developed. much of their land is focused on, is owned by the Sycamore Land Trust or by the borders the Hoosier National Forest, so they are very unlikely to be developed. It was brought to my attention by the owners of these parcels that the circumstances, that the nature of these parcels may make it unreasonable or unnecessary to annex them. And I believe at least some of those individuals are here tonight who can also offer comment, but I would share that as well. And Mr. President, if it would be appropriate, I would be inclined to invite those individuals to offer comment, or we could wait until public comment for that.
Thank you. I would prefer to wait for public comment.
Okay, that's fine. So, and they may be in the best position to respond to council questions in detail, but I will do what I can to.
Thank you very much. And as we have done in the past, I think I would prefer that they go through public comment, but if it would help explain this ordinance, as we've done in the past, I think there's a possibility we could allow that participation. Before we move forward, I would like to give the staff an opportunity to
that's right.
share their position on this amendment.
Good evening, it's Philippa Guthrie, Corporation Counsel. Thank you. The administration is actually neutral on this amendment. As Councillor Scamboluri mentioned, it's 5 parcels. At least one of them, a large area of it, is Sycamore Land Trust. So there's a covenant on it. Only one of the 5 parcels is wavered and none of them have sewer or water. So I think that's really our position on it. That's all I really have to say about it.
Okay, thank you so much for weighing in. Before we go forward, I'll ask Councilmember Flaherty, is there any other procedural motion or actions needed before we move on?
No, I think we would just be moving to council question next.
Okay, thank you. Just double checking. Thank you very much. We will now move to council member questions. And I see Council Member Volan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was intrigued by the idea that only one of the properties is wavered, but it doesn't have service. Could someone explain that to me? Why would anyone sign a waiver if CBU is not providing them service?
Mr. Rooker looks prepared. My understanding is that it is too far away from a sewer line to tap into.
Well,
but I need to defer.
Why would they sign a waiver though? That's the thing.
That's what I need to defer on. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Volan. Michael Rooker, City Attorney. This can happen sometimes from time to time where a property owner is intrigued or wants to have the option of having sewer service extended to them. And then for a variety of reasons, somewhere in the process, they've signed a waiver and we do have an obligation to serve them if they are willing to go through the entire process and pay the necessary fees to have sewer extended to them. But for some reason or other, it doesn't actually end up being extended. The city's obligation to extend sewer service on our normal terms would still apply to a parcel like that, but sometimes it just hasn't been extended either for cost reasons or something else comes up that causes sewer service not to actually end up physically being extended.
While I have you and while we're on this topic, if you can answer the more general question of my understanding about the extension of sewer, that phrase, is that if there is a group or a collection of parcels that does want sewer extended, CBU will extend it, but they're going the people who want the extension will pay the cost of the extension. When you say the city extends, under what circumstances does the city extend the sewer main?
And so just to be clear, when we talk about extensions of sewer mains, we're really just talking at this point about municipal residents. So for non-municipal residents, at this point, the city's policy is not to extend sewer mains absent exceptional circumstances.
That's understandable, but yeah, I mean, in the past, at least. In other words, you're saying that that from this point forward, no one will be extended sewer unless they agree to be annexed as a condition of it.
That's the current utility service board policy in a nutshell, although it's not a universal policy. That is the general policy. There are certain exceptions. For example, the library extension that's currently being built on the south side of town, sewer will be extended there. That's a public amenity, and so it's an important place to extend sewer to. So there are certain exceptions like that. The question you're asking about for municipal residents, though, if they're willing to pay the cost of...
I gotta put you on time. I'm out of time. I'll come back to the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. Do we have any other questions from council? Seeing none, Councilmember Smith.
Should I just go ahead, Jim?
Yes, Councilmember Smith, I recognize you.
I'm just going to ask if Mr. Rooker can just finish. I can cede some of my time to Mr. Boland's question.
Certainly. So if I believe the current threshold for utilities, for our utilities corporation is of 60% of the residents want sewer service extended and sign an agreement that they would do that, we would extend sewer service is typically the threshold. But if individuals within the city are willing to pay, even one property is willing to pay for the extension of sewer service, absent statutory credits that we have to give them for a period of time, we do have an obligation, a legal obligation to extend sewer service, a sewer main down to their property if they're willing to pay for it and pay the connection fee.
Okay, so I mean, the city doesn't sort of extend sewer mains without, I mean, especially to areas that's not been developed yet. It doesn't just do it in anticipation of development. It does so when asked.
I suppose, yes. I think the short answer to that question is yes.
You can see why I might be a little confused by that. Mr. Unger, can you?
Yeah, the one thing I'd add to what Mike had to say is the city's actually, there was some statutory changes a few years ago that subjected the city to what's referred to as the Iurc's main extension rules. And those rules require the city to extend service for free if the cost, the total revenue to be generated from the people that are requesting the service is, if the cost is less than 3 years of revenue that the city would get from those people. So basically they're entitled to certain credits. There's the 3-year revenue allowance credit. If it's less than 3 years of the revenue, the city would have to extend it for free. And then there's other subsequent connector fee requirements where the city collects fees from other people that connect into that line and pays it to the people that paid for the original cost of the main extension. So there can be situations where the city is required to extend it for free within its boundaries. Mike would probably be more familiar with what the city's actually the Bloomington's actual policies are, but it's not unusual for cities to sometimes extend facilities to undeveloped areas.
Okay, and when you say 3 years of revenue, you mean the line item on the CBU bill, that's the cost of transmission, not the actual cost of the water.
No. I mean, no, the total revenue that the city would see from that customer. So if the customer paid $1,000 a year and
so including the water that they consume.
Correct. Yes, the consumption.
I have more questions. Okay, I'll hold them. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Scambolari.
Yes, just a procedural item. Mr. Unger, could Mr. Unger please introduce himself and his role, please?
Sorry, yes. Yep, I'm Steve Unger. I'm an attorney at Bozeman, Kenyon Evans, and I'm outside annexation counsel for the administration.
Okay, thank you for doing that, Mr. Unger, and thank you for catching that, Councilmember Scambolari. It appears that, okay, here we go. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to follow up on some of the questions that Councilmember Boland asked, even though my questions are not particularly on Amendment 2, but just to understand the process a little bit better. So if a property owner or a group of property owners want to hook on to the city sewer, they still have to pay for it, right?
There are certain fees that are charged that are going to vary from circumstance to circumstance. But yes, there are fees for connecting to the city sewer system.
And do 60% of the property owners in a geographic area have to agree that they all want sewer service before such service will be extended to them?
You know, I think that I may have misspoken on that. I think there were certain policies that required that threshold. At this point, I believe the obligation, and Steve may be able to confirm this with the main extension rules, I believe that provided that an individual, even a single individual, would pay the entire cost of the main extension and there are no capacity issues, City of Bloomington Utilities would extend sewer service, but to that individual and if they're in the municipal corporation.
So that 60%, I can just cross that out.
Cross that out, yes.
Thank you. And then Mr. Unger said if the cost of providing sewer service connection is less than 3 years of revenues the city can expect to gain from those new customers, the city must pay for the sewer extension. Is that only within city limits?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct in the sense that the city is not obligated to extend service outside of its boundaries.
Okay, well then they're not obligated to pay for it either if the city can, if the revenues the city is expected to take in are greater than the costs. Correct? In the 3-year period.
Inside this, you mean inside the city's boundaries?
So what if, I guess I'm trying to understand, if somebody is outside the city's boundaries and the revenue that the city can expect to get from them or that business or whatever it is over 3 years is greater than the cost of extending sewer to them, then what happens?
Under and as Mike, my understanding from Mike, and the current policy of the utility board is the city will not extend service as a general rule outside of its boundaries, even if the revenue to the city would exceed the cost of the main extension.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Do we have any other second round questions from council? Seeing none.
Councilmember Volan had his hand up.
No, seeing none, we'll begin round 3. Councilmember Volan.
Thank you. Sorry you were going there, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Scambolari, would you please put the map back up if you could? And could
Actually,
you
I'll,
sort of, sorry?
Mr. Lucas could do that, but yes.
That'd be great. Could you zoom in a little bit and sort of identify as you can the 5 parcels and which one is the one or which 2 are protected by easements with the land trust?
Thank you, Mr. Lucas. 2 triangles. Mr. Lucas, could you point those out? 1, 2, 2 smaller,
Okay.
2 medium-sized parcels, and then 1 big, long, skinny parcel.
Okay.
Okay. And I believe, I need to double check this with the property owners, but I believe the largest parcel, the long skinny one, actually borders Sycamore Land Trust, but I want to check on that too.
Well, again, my understanding is that the 2 parcels are permanently protected by conservation easement with the land trust. So they're not just bordering the land trust, they are protected
Right, yeah,
by
I'm
the land
sorry.
trust.
You're right, I misspoke. And then that would be, I'm pointing to my own screen, I'm sorry. The parallelogram on the east side.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Okay. That is a property owned by, I believe, the Bowie family, and that part of that is owned by the Sycamore Land Trust.
And then so the large parcel is also.
I believe so, yes. And if there are sections of it, I would rather have the owners point out the exact sections of it.
I thought I was done with rhombuses and parallelograms with tanggrams, but
We are never
Thank
done
you.
with rhombuses.
glad those terms are still available to be used. Okay, thank you. It answers my question.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. Do we have any other questions from council? And this is on Amendment 17, Amendment 2 of Ordinance 17-12. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes. It seems the argument here is that these are parcels that are very unlikely to be developed and are currently not developed, except for the one, I guess. I'm looking at another map here that was provided by the administration. So I'm wondering if there aren't other parcels that are in a similar situation. For example, again, in area, I think it's in area 2. It doesn't have street names here. But anyway, there's some big parcels south of Roar Road that are undeveloped. And so I'm just wondering why we would take out these 5 parcels and how they may be different from other big undeveloped parcels that are part of the areas to be annexed.
I think that's an interesting question. And candidly, I've wondered the same thing too. These were the parcels that were brought to my attention and for which I was asked for help. And so that's what I focused on. I did not hear any specific comments from, and perhaps other council members heard from the owners of other properties, but these just happened to be the properties that were brought to my attention and for which I was asked for help. But I think that's an interesting question.
I can take a stab at answering that.
Go ahead.
We
Ms.
looked
Thank you.
Philippa Guthrie Corporation Council. We looked extensively at parcels all around the areas. And ones that look undeveloped sometimes are prime for development and or already in development. It depends on the area. Some of the ones on the east side, these 5 in particular, why we feel neutral about them is partly because, God bless you, they have no sewer service, no water service. There's, I think, only one structure on all of those parcels. And as we said, they are very unlikely to be developed. We don't feel that way about a lot of the other parcels around the different areas.
I guess I'm looking at a very large parcel south of Roar Road, west of East Summer Creek Drive, and east of Jackson Creek Drive, which looks very similar. I don't know who owns it, but that's the one I was looking at. And I'm out of time, so.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Do we have any, Piedmont Smith, I apologize. Do we have any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now move. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Well, if I may have another bite at the same question.
Well,
so
what I will ask, and before you get started, and we'll make sure you get your full time, and either the parliamentarian can help me or our council staff. And maybe I'm wrong here, but this is the area that's near Rogers Road and Smith Road. And I was just wondering the appropriateness of introducing or discussing other areas throughout the annexation map. Not trying to hinder one way or another, but and you're using that as a descriptor, I assume, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Well, I'm trying to apply the same logic that was used for Amendment 2 of exempting those properties at Rogers Road and Sayre Road I'm trying to apply that same logic that they're undeveloped, they're Sycamore Land Trust, et cetera, to other parcels so that I can decide whether or not I support the amendment. So I think it is relevant to look at other parcels and see if they are similar.
Oh, thank you. And I never said they were irrelevant, just looking from a procedure standpoint. So thank you. So you can please proceed.
Well, I wonder if Mr. Lucas could show the developed versus undeveloped map that Mr. Rooker sent to us late last week, so that I can show you which area I'm talking about, or the Area 2 map, either way.
Councilmember Flaherty.
Sorry, I had a question actually. I was just raising my hand. I didn't know if that was going to take some time, and it's in a similar vein. So, but we can proceed with.
Oh, thank you. We'll come to you, Mr. Lucas.
Yeah, sorry, just pulling that up now. And I'm sorry, which were the parcels that you were focused on?
It's at the very bottom right corner of the screen currently. Now it's in the middle. That green area. Just south of Roar Road. Does anybody in the administration know what the status is of those undeveloped parcels? Green means undeveloped. And why they wouldn't meet the same criteria as in Amendment 2.
So Michael Rooker, again, City Attorney. What I would say about that parcel is it provides contiguity. Without that parcel being included in the annexation area, Area 2 would actually not be contiguous, which is a requirement for an annexation area to not have any breaks in it, so to speak, such that all of the areas touch each other. And just in that vein, the reason particular parcels were included can be a complicated thing. It's difficult to apply standards universally like that. There are certainly cases where development occurs sometimes ever so slightly more distantly from a municipal boundary, and this is not just a unique thing for Bloomington. And so there are going to be slightly undeveloped areas between a municipal boundary and developed areas that are appropriate for annexation. And I think you can find that in places on these maps as well. So I think this may be a circumstance that's similar to that, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Okay, so I couldn't tell from the creek and the floodplain there that one parcel does stretch from the north to the south of that green area. That's a single correct. Parcel. Okay, I couldn't tell that. Well then, yeah, the contiguity makes sense. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. I appreciate your patience. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions following up in a similar vein about trying to apply uniform standards to the extent possible. I think the parcel just pointed out is owned by something that ends with Investments LLC, just as an FYI, which maybe distinguishes it from something that has a restrictive covenant or on its development with Sycamore Land Trust. I wanted to ask if the administration is aware of other parcels that would fit that specific criteria, perhaps both undeveloped and essentially undevelopable because it is protected by a land trust. Are there any other, are you aware of any other areas like that?
No, when we went through and looked at the developed undeveloped map, we are not aware of any parcels like that. I will confess that I did not look at the restrictive covenants on all of the thousands of parcels individually that form the annexation areas. So I can't be certain exactly which deed restrictions apply to which parcels. But no, I'm aware of no parcels that are similar to this. That's not to say that it wouldn't be impossible that there are deed restrictions out there that we're unaware of, but I am not aware of.
Then to your knowledge, no one else has contacted the city, or at least not that you've become aware of, with a similar issue, restrictive covenant.
That's correct. Nobody's contacted the city and presented a circumstance that's quite like these 5 parcels. I think that's
okay.
Councilmember Flaherty.
So similar question, again, trying to think through the reasoning behind it, a variety of reasons behind annexation. I think there's a case to be made for this amendment for those reasons, both undeveloped and undevelopable, and protected as a land trust. By the same token, should that preclude something from being annexed? It's, the houses that are next door, let's say to the west, are very similar. I mean, we have probably a single household residing on a property that's next to each other. And because one happens to be a little bit longer and have a covenant with the land trust, we're saying that one shouldn't belong, but the other one should. But if we're talking about paying for services and, sort of paying into the common pool of resources to, within a city boundary of some kind, I'm not sure that's necessarily relevant. How does the administration in particular feel? Although I would invite an answer from Councilmember Scambolari too, about the notion of fairness among these properties and their neighbors to the west, in terms of, paying taxes and paying into our common resources.
I don't know if Mr. Rooker wants to go. I think that's a very good question. I think fairness is certainly an issue. As I mentioned, these were the properties that were brought to my attention. I think the question regarding related properties is certainly an interesting one. These properties, as I understand it, are valued at $100 and I think $200 respectively. And so I don't think that the taxes that come from them would be very substantial. And I don't know if that's the case for the other properties. They were not part of what I was considering, but Mr. Rooker, maybe you can add to that.
We are out of time.
I'm sorry,
yes.
I'm out of time.
No, you're absolutely correct. And I will take a bite of the apple. This is the 3rd round. But I would like to continue the question on the issue of fairness. So Mr. Rooker, if you'd like to continue, if you weren't done with the answer.
Yeah, I think I would. I think there is something to the point that you made, Councilmember Flaherty, that when you live in proximity to a municipality, it's inevitable that you're going to enjoy certain municipal services. And when you own property near a municipality, it's inevitable that you're going to enjoy the advantages of certain municipal services because you're in such close proximity to it. And I think that's largely the point that you were trying to make. I don't know that there's much more to add to it than that. But I think that's an inevitability.
I will just add one other thing. Sycamore Land Trust.
I'm sorry, can you? We know who you are, but can you just identify?
Corporation Council. Very sorry. Being a nonprofit would not pay any additional taxes if they were annexed. So that's something to consider.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Smith?
Thank you. I would ask if Mr. Rooker or Ms. Guthrie would describe the impact of if the continuity, I always have a hard time with that word, contiguity, if that is broken there with this amendment and removing that in Ms. Scambolari's amendment, how does that impact the map? What sections then are no longer contiguous and are therefore removed from the annexation?
I think if you removed, you mean the parcel that Councilor Piedmont Smith was talking about?
Right.
Sort of broken the contiguity.
Right.
You would have then, the areas need to be contiguous with both the city and each other. So there would have been a break in the contiguity between each other. And so you would end up with everything to the east and north there would be no longer contiguous with the rest of area 2.
So they would
it
in
would have to be
effect,
eliminated, or you'd have to have another ordinance, but at this stage, that's not really realistic.
so is everything east and north? And maybe I misunderstood. Is that the part of the parcel that is in Amendment 2? Oh,
No. Councilmember Scambaluri's amendment presents no contiguity issues. Just the sort of the hypothetical example parcel Councilmember Piedmont Smith pointed out earlier would, but that parcel is not part of any proposed amendment.
okay. Thank you. I misunderstood. I thought that was kind of, I didn't realize it was hypothetical. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Do we have any further questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we will now go to the public for public comments on Ordinance 17-12, which is Area 2, Southeast Bloomington Annexation. And these are public comments on Amendment Ordinance 17-12, Amendment 02, which is a removal of identified parcels from Southeast Bloomington Annexation area near Rogers Road and Smith Road. I would also remind the public that there is a limit of 2 minutes per person in public speaking. If you'd like to speak, please indicate by using the raised hand function in Zoom, or you could send a note to our meeting host to indicate that you would like to speak or have public comment. Okay, Mr. Lucas.
Yes, first up is Jocelyn Bowie.
Hi, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Yep. Hi, thank you. Thank you again for letting me speak. I spoke at one of the meetings a couple weeks ago.
I'm sorry, before you get started, could you identify yourself, please?
I'm sorry, Jocelyn Bowie, and I live in Gramercy Park, and I own the parallelogram on the map. I will say that the parallelogram and the large parcel are the two that are under conservation easement. So these 5 parcels constitute about 16 acres, and I would say about 14 and a half of the acres are in conservation easement. And I know that Councilmember Piedmont Smith has been concerned about fairness and consistency. And apart from the fact that the city sewer system doesn't come close enough to our properties, and we have requested, actually, 2 of us on 2 separate occasions in 2007 and 2018, when we both had to replace sewer to properties out there. We were told that the city does not have, the sewer doesn't come out anywhere close enough to hook up, and it was not going to come out. But I just want to point out that there are 7 properties on the east side of Smith Road that are contiguous to our land. And none of these 7 properties, and they are all much newer homes, large properties, it's all rural, but none of these are included. So on the one side to the west, yes, homes are being annexed or possibly being annexed. But again, then to the east and to the north, they're not. So, fairness is there's fairness on both sides. But I will point out again that our properties do not form a land bridge to any other areas the cities wish to annex. The homes are very old. The properties that the Freys, 3 of those parcels belong to the Freys, and my property have never changed hands since like 1950, 56 in my case, except through inheritance. The one house that may have a waiver has changed hands multiple times, but it does not have sewer. And I will just point out that because of the topography, we are on an edge of a huge undevelopable area.
I'm sorry, Ms. Bowie, I believe you're out of time.
I'm sorry, I was looking and I was reading and not looking. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Sorry, thank you. Who do we have next, Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Barbara Frey.
Yes, my name is Barbara Frey, and I'm one of the property owners whose property is being considered in Amendment 02 for Ordinance 1712 Area 2. I concur with what Jocelyn Bowie has stated. I would like to reiterate and emphasize a few key points. Including these 5 parcels in the plan is not a win for the property owners, nor is it really a win for the city. If our parcels are included in the annexation, our taxes will increase and we will get very little, if anything, in return in terms of expected city services. And given the nature of these 5 parcels, the city would derive only negligible tax revenue. I am particularly concerned about our land that is under conservation easement through the Sycamore Land Trust and is permanently protected and undevelopable. The annexation plan separates this acreage from a larger tract that is under conservation easement. Our wish is that all our land under conservation easement remain under Monroe County jurisdiction and not be split between county and city jurisdictions. Furthermore, the 5 parcels under consideration do not connect with or form a bridge to other developable land. They are contiguous with a large area to the east that is characterized by steep-sided ravines that is undevelopable per Monroe County codes. Therefore, the city would not be able to expand east of us, and the properties north of us have not been included in the annexation plan. The rationale for what was included and what was not is confusing and seems rather arbitrary. So we respectfully request that the designated 5 parcels be removed from the annexation plan. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Frey. Who do we have next, Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Janice Wiggins.
Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking on behalf of the property owners at Edgewood Hill. I'm one that have been here for over 45 years. And to now, again, dealing with this annexation, I still would like to point out, as many have before me, that we enjoy and love our area without being annexed to the city. Even though we have no bus service provided, no sewer line.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm having trouble hearing her. Is it just me?
She sounds like she's going back and forth like this.
Ms. Wiggins, is it possible you could speak directly into your microphone?
Speak directly into your microphone. I'm sorry, just speak. Again, I was referring to what is lacking already, but we would like to continue. We have no sewer lines put in, no sidewalks, lights, curving, no commercial or resident growth. We would have to walk down to Highway 46 to access the city of Bloomington. These things we have been able to do. And I doubt very seriously if the city would provide all the necessary amenities that are needed. We are very, very comfortable. We have enjoyed our neighborhood, and I do thank our president and vice president for continuing to support this non-annexation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wiggins, for your comments. Who do we have next, Mr. Lucas? And before you get started, I will, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yeah, yes, Mr. President. I wonder if Ms. Wiggins was talking about Edgewood Hills, which is not in this amendment. It sounded like she was because she was talking about going on to Highway 46. So if you could just clarify that.
She lives in Edgewood Hills.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will. Thank you. And I will remind the public that if you wish to publicly speak, please indicate by using the raised hand function in Zoom or contact our meeting host through the chat function to indicate your desire to speak. You will be allowed to have 2 minutes of public comment. Mr. Lucas, who do we have next, please?
Next is Jeremy Janes.
Hi, my name is Jeremy James, and I'm the property owner of the squarish property that you have seen on the map. And I was, I came here to support everything that Barbara Frey and Jocelyn Bowie said. They really, I won't take really any more of your time because they said it succinctly. I just want to put in my 2 cents as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. James. Do we have anyone else, Mr. Lucas?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, we will wait just a second. Okay, seeing no further public comment, we will now return to council for final comment and or other questions, if any. Councilmember Boland.
I did have a question. Do we have a sense of what the taxes would be on these properties? I know that for at least a couple of parcels, they'll be virtually nil. But I mean, is there a significant, will there be a significant increase in taxes to the property owners of these parcels?
I would need to defer to city staff on that, but well, Mr. Rooker, you just popped in.
Thank you, Councilmember Volin. Michael Rooker, City Attorney. I don't have the property tax impact analysis aggregated for these 5 parcels. I can tell you that the gross assessed value of these 5 parcels is $379,100. So just to characterize that briefly, that is not a particularly large figure in the context of this annexation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Bowman. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, one of our commenters from the public, I think Ms. Frey mentioned the desire to keep contiguous Sycamore Land Trust protected properties under the same jurisdiction, county versus city. Is there? It's not immediately obvious to me why that would make a difference. I would imagine the terms of the conservation easement or whatever it is dictate what can happen. Can anyone from the city administration perhaps weigh in on what impacts there might be of contiguous protected lands being under multiple jurisdictions, so to speak?
I can, Michael Rooker, again, I can do my best. I certainly am not the foremost legal expert on the Sycamore Land Trust, but I can't think of anything that would change between the city or county's jurisdictions if a particular parcel were in the county versus in the city. I can't think of anything. I don't know if perhaps Corporation Counsel Guthrie has any idea if there might be anything that's different, but I cannot imagine what would be different.
Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie, I can't think of anything either. I mean, there would be differences if you were developing a property, obviously different codes and things, but I can't think of anything when it's an easement like that.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Councilmember Smith.
I just want to say that I certainly support this amendment. It's a very not dense area. It's not developable, which is certainly one of the major criteria in the annexation argument. And beyond that, these folks are happy where they're at, and I support that. So I'll be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Do we have any other Councilmember Flaherty?
Yes, I was going to add my final comments as well.
Yes.
I think I will support the amendment. I see it as something of a closed question. I appreciate the work that's been done on it and the answers we received. I think the fact that it's both undeveloped and undevelopable, both of those things is important as compared to areas that are just undeveloped, of course. Second, I don't think the fact that it's not developable is alone dispositive. I do bristle a little bit at the notion that the property owners immediately adjacent to the west may become part of the city and these ones won't. It's a bit of an arbitrary line, but of course that's what this entire exercise is some, not arbitrary, but some level of line drawing inevitably. And the commenters rightly pointed out that the same as that's true to the west, true to immediately to the northeast is the fact that those parcels have not been considered in this annexation. So I think on balance, I'm going to go to support this and appreciate the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Council Flaherty. Any further final comments from council? Okay, seeing none, are we ready for the question? Thank you. Will the clerk please call the roll for Ordinance 17-12, Amendment 02?
Yes, Councilmember Rosenbarger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
and Rallo,
Yes.
and Volin.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you. Thank you. Thank you. That amendment passes 9-0. Okay, Councilmember Flaherty.
We would be ready to consider another amendment, whoever would like to move one.
Yes, if I may, Mr. President,
Yes, please.
I'd like to move Amendment 03 to Ordinance 1712.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. Will the clerk please call the roll, please?
Mr.
Oh,
President. Sorry,
Yes.
at this point, we would just move to presentation of the
Yes.
amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr.
No, thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Lucas, could I trouble you to put up the map again, please? And just by way of background, while that's happening, this past amendment looked at very specific parcels. Amendment 03 that we're focusing on now actually pertains to an entire neighborhood, and that would be Edgewood Hills. So, Mr. Lucas, if you could indicate things as I mention them. Immediately north of this neighborhood is State Road 46 leading to Nashville. Okay. The entrance to the neighborhood, there's one, and that's Lori Lane, is a quarter or a half a mile or so from the current city limits. There's essentially one way in and one way out of this neighborhood. For anyone, many of you I know have seen it, but for those who haven't, this is very hilly and rocky. It's very heavily forested, surrounded on most sides by Hoosier National Forest. There are no waivers signed for this area. Every home is on septic. And just the development in this area seems qualitatively different from much of what we're searching, what we're seeking to annex in other areas. I have two colleagues who have joined me in co-sponsoring this amendment, Councilmember Volin and Councilmember Sandberg, and I would invite them to comment as well, if they like.
Certainly, I would. I have attended a Zoom meeting to talk to the residents in this area, and I feel very comfortable after talking with them directly and comparing notes with my colleagues who are co-sponsors here that this is an appropriate area to be removed from consideration
due to all the features and what is surrounding it. And so I am happy to bring this amendment forward along with Ms. Scambolery and Mr. Rowland.
I'll take a chance here too. This is like several other places, a close call. The neighborhood does in fact benefit from its proximity to the city, and that alone is enough reason to consider it. But for me, what put it over the top of my very high threshold for considering removing some parcel from annexation was Lori Lane. That the fact that it's, I mean, this neighborhood was built, I believe, in the 50s. So it was long before the city was even thinking about moving this far east. But more importantly, it's the section of road, I was trying to measure it on the map here, is they've estimated at half a mile. I don't think it's quite that long, but it's not just State Road 46, which, as we all know, is managed by NDOT. There's all but no shoulder there. And, you know, I think that that was enough for me to support the removal of this area. So, I mean, I think it should be an indication to other neighborhoods that would seek to remove themselves that, you know, the proximity to the city is a big deal, and that, you know, this neighborhood, which is also not connected to Cedar Springs to its west, isolates it even further. So that's why I supported it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, thank you very much. I'm sorry, go ahead, Councilman.
Oh, and I would just underscore Councilmember Volan's point too, is it's easy to conclude and that this neighborhood is much like all the others on that side of 446. And it is actually geographically separate. None of these roads connect to Cedar Springs or to Heritage Woods roads or any of the surrounding neighborhoods. It really is a one way in, one way out kind of self-contained area. So, but with that, whatever questions or comments. Oh,
one more thing I'll just add is the distance between the corner of Lori Lane and 46 and the light at 446 is 0.4 of a mile. Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification, and thank you, sponsors, for your presentation. A bit of corrective housekeeping. This is Amendment 3 of Ordinance 17-12, which is Area 2, and it has to do with the removal of identified parcels from the Southeast Bloomington Annexation area near State Road 46, Lori Lane, and Ridgewood Drive. And thank you for allowing me to do that. I will now ask the administration or staff, do they have input on this amendment?
Yes, thank you. Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie. The administration opposes this amendment. Edgewood Hills is right next to the city, essentially. There's one neighborhood in between it and the city. It is exactly the kind of residential neighborhood that we have been bringing into Bloomington for, you know, over 100 years. Residents who live there, there are actually 3 waivers, but they don't have sewer. They do have municipal water. They are appropriate actually for a number of city services, including sanitation, road maintenance, you know, plowing, all of that. You know, just a comment on a neighborhood that is like this, that is very close to the city. You know, they turn out of Lori Lane and they go to the city and use the amenities, just like the rest of the community. So they are already a part of the community. They go to work in the city, they grocery shop there, they use the roads, and in all respects, they're part of the community. I want to just point out, for example, for a concrete example of how the city pays for its amenities. So for example, with parks, parks and recreation, a lot of their programming, for example, is heavily subsidized by city taxes. So for example, the swimming pools, swimming lessons, Kids City every summer, just a lot of the things that parks offers, and there are hundreds of things that they offer every year. Those are subsidized heavily by the city taxes. In other words, the fees that are paid for those do not pay for them, do not cover the costs. We have been digging around just a little bit, doing our homework, and in 2020, over 45% of the individuals using that programming resided outside of the city boundaries. So you can see there's a bit of a disconnect between usage and funding. So I just wanted to point that out, that is one of the reasons that these kinds of neighborhoods are part of our community and we think they should be annexed. So that's the administration's viewpoint on this neighborhood.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guthrie. We will now move to council questions. First round questions. Okay, Council Member Sandberg.
A question about the amount of taxes that do go to support parks and recreation. It was my understanding, and this might be several budget cycles ago, that a good part of parks and recreations are paid for by fees. Could someone from the staff give me an idea of how much is tax supported and how much are fee supported by the actual users of the various programs and amenities of the parks? Has that flipped over time to where it's more subsidized by taxes?
Michael Rooker, City Attorney. I can tell you about some of the programs that I know about. I certainly cannot give you a program by program picture of it. For example, Bryan Park Pool, approximately 56% of the funding necessary to operate Bryan Park Pool is supported by user fees. The remainder is supported out of the general fund. So we're talking about city property taxes. Mills Pool, it's far lower. The user fees support, I believe, approximately 20% of it. I'd have to go back and look at Paula's budget presentation. I believe that figure was included in there. Something like the municipal golf course is much more heavily funded. I think it's closer to 86% is funded by user fees. So, but you know, all of these amenities, the TLRC is not fully funded. I don't remember that figure off the top of my head. All of these amenities are able to exist though, and able to be accessible to everyone in our community without an exorbitant fee to access these amenities because we do subsidize them. And there's nothing unique about that. That's just the rule for municipalities around the state, around the country. You want to have public pools, you want to have public parks, you want to have municipal golf courses, things like that are generally subsidized by tax dollars. There's nothing unique about Bloomington in that regard.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I wanted to follow up on something Councilmember Volan said that I did not understand. He said that he supports this amendment because there's no shoulder on the road. Was he talking about 46 Lori Lane? Which road was he talking about, and why is that a reason to vote for this amendment?
I mean, there are a number of reasons why this neighborhood, I thought, you know, I mean, it's a close call for me. You know, I do sympathize with the administration's arguments, but there's a lot of, you know, this is a neighborhood that it has very steep ravines, a very narrow road, is unlikely, if ever, to get sewer. But for me, I mean, there are other neighborhoods for which that's true. In this case, though, the only connection to the city before this were to be annexed, was 46, 4/10 of a mile east of, I mean, the only other way for people to get to the city from Lori Lane is down 46. And 46 has no pedestrian amenities east of 446. So, you know, like, again, a close call, but I thought that was enough. I don't know if that answers your question.
So you were talking about State Road 46 that has no shoulder.
Yes.
Okay, but I assume Lori Lane doesn't have a shoulder either.
Yes, but it's not a state highway with high speeds run by NDOT.
Right.
It's a neighborhood street that is significantly more walkable.
I see. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. This question is for the administration. I appreciate their feedback on the amendment. and certainly there's truth in the points Ms. Guthrie made. But that's true potentially for all of the areas just outside of this current annexation boundary as well. In particular, this amendment would strike not just Edgewood Hills, but about 5 or 6, maybe 8 parcels that are directly off of 46 on the south side of the road. Of course, in this annexation proposal, Area 2, none of the parcels on the north side of the road are actually included, and nor is sort of the development off of Kings Road just down the street, which, while a little bit more sprawling than Edgewood Hills, is sort of similar in that it's only a little bit further down, further down the road, and it's kind of a side development. So does the administration have anything to add, I guess, beyond the argument that folks currently outside of city boundaries, benefit from city services, which I certainly agree with. I just don't think that's fully dispositive. And I think those examples I just pointed to illustrate that we're necessarily line drawing. So are there any other unique considerations that we need to bear in mind as we consider this amendment that the administration could add? Or even, frankly, explain why the areas to the north of 46 weren't included in Area 2?
North of 46. I'm not sure about that. I can't answer that question. I don't know if Mike Rooker is able to, or Steve Unger, but this is just a neighborhood that looks like a lot of the rest of the city. It's dense enough, it's the kind that we think should be added to the neighborhood. We had to draw the line somewhere, and that is a logical way to draw it, because Area 2 from that, the eastern edge of that just goes all the way down, following a line. So that was our thought.
And just one minor comment. I see Deputy Mayor Don Griffin has turned his camera on as well, but just briefly, I think also we endeavored to make municipal boundaries somewhat coherent as well. So you'll often see them drawn along a roadway because it gets a little bit wonky for people to understand where the boundary to a municipality begins and ends when you're sort of jutting in and out and moving away from roadways and down into confusing areas. So there is an element of just general coherence so that understanding where the boundary begins and ends is accessible to the public and to those who have to sort of administer things. So that's another factor. But again, there's a myriad of factors that went into drawing the map. And in different places, there were different factors that were dispositive. And I think you mentioned that yourself, Councilmember Flaherty, at 1.2.
Appreciate that detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Smith.
So I just want to ask these questions out loud, and if the sponsors wish to answer them, that's fine. Otherwise, we'll just kind of have a discourse on them. I mean, is it a dense area? Does it meet the density standard for annexation? And I realize it's only one part.
Sure. I had a number of conversations actually with the Homeowners Association, and according to their numbers, they have more acres than homes. They have 58.38 acres with 58 houses.
Thank you. And
by their, I'm
yes.
sorry. And by their numbers, that's about fewer than 3 persons per acre. So.
And is their road in and out, is it ever going to be amenable to sidewalks?
Not without taking out a lot of trees. I've driven that road many, many times. And it is not a particularly wide road. 2 cars passing each other in opposite directions would need to go very, very slowly. In many places, the road runs right up to trees. So it's not a road and then a sidewalk or a buffer and then some forest. It runs right up to trees. I guess theoretically, you could put sidewalks anywhere with enough time and money. I don't see that being likely here. And I also think, go ahead.
So I keep an eye on the clock. They all have septics.
Correct.
And they're all maintaining their own septics.
Correct.
And they are taking care of their own trash at this point. And they're hiring their own private trash collector.
That's my understanding.
So I can't see in the argumentation that there's very many advantages to be hooked up and be a part of the city. You know, I've thought about that as I'm looked at the other amendment as well. And so it's, for me, it's just a good argument that they shouldn't be in the annexation because they really aren't going to benefit much. And they're all pretty self-sufficient folks and they all want to stay self-sufficient. And geez, I just can't see forcing them into involuntary action. So, well, thanks for entertaining my questions.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Thank you. This is a really hard one for me. I think leaving it out would make the map look really weird. So like for the sponsors, well, first I just wanted to say there are a lot of areas in our current city that don't have sidewalks, very dense areas. I mean, Lincoln Street, Grant Street, streets in Elm Heights, Bryan Park, Prospect Hill, near West Side. I mean, Broadview, we have a lot of areas. So sidewalks to me isn't like a deciding factor, the ability to put them in or not, I would say. But what distinguishes the area south for you, so Gentry East, from this? Because for me, for me, it really does. I think like 46 is a natural boundary, and then the edges of these neighborhoods are a natural boundary to the east. And I think like leaving this out would look like a hole, I guess.
If I can take this one.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Again, I think that the highways make a difference here. With the annexation of Area 2, a significant portion of 446 will be entirely within the city, much as there are other state roads, State Road 46 west of 446, the bypass and so on, are entirely within the city limits. And of course, NDOT does work with the city. It's just that they have priority and they make decisions in the end, the final decision. But what Mr. Rooker said about, or I forget who there was counsel, whether it was Mr. Rooker or Ms. Guthrie, said about sort of the significance, like the border of the city would be moved out well past Lowry Lane, whereas now the logical border is 446. That's the point where everybody says, okay, I'm in Bloomington now. While we certainly could push for NDOT to improve this 4/10 of a mile portion, maybe half a mile, if you go past Lowry Lane, the rest of the neighborhood. It just seems it's more arbitrary than most of the decisions that have been made about the maps as a whole. And I don't actually think that this corner being cut out would make it look, I mean, there's all sorts of arbitrary looking corners here. I really do think that Lowry Lane emptying out into 46 and the nature of 46 itself is the big difference. The other neighborhoods to the south all open onto 446, which is going to be completely within the city. This neighborhood does not. And it's one thing to have a street without sidewalks, like say Grant in the middle of my district, but those streets are 20, 25 mile an hour streets. This is a 55 mile an hour highway.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from council? First round. Okay, seeing none, I'll take a bite if it's okay. First thing I will say is that self-sufficiency and many that are in the annexation, that's kind of their defense. And in my mind, that's just not enough not to consider annexation. However, the question that I have is, this is with staff. What is due to the terrain and the landscape, how likely is it for us to ever get sewer infrastructure in that area and throughout that area? I don't know if it's Mr. Rooker, okay, there you go.
So I have not consulted with utilities engineering about the likelihood that sewer would be extended to this particular neighborhood. I would point out that the neighborhood is already receiving water service. So there is utility infrastructure in the ground here. Municipal services are being provided to the neighborhood. So that does distinguish it from the previous amendment proposed by Councilmember Scambaluri, where the residents were not receiving either municipal sewer or water service. That said, there are topographical challenges to providing sewer service to this neighborhood. Sewer lines are typically gravity fed. That's the cheapest way to provide them. I believe in this area, we would have to look at something that would be more akin to a low pressure force main, which is a little bit of a more complicated and a little bit more expensive way to provide municipal sewer service. But certainly if the residents wanted to have municipal sewer service extended to them and they could afford to pay for the necessary extension for a system like that, of course, as we mentioned before, we would be obligated under the IURC's main extension rules to provide them that service once they're in the city.
Okay, thank you. And I've also, part of this discussion had to do with user fees. And I think many of us know, in particular with Park and Rec, to use those services, there are a fee structure. One is for city residents and one is for county residents. And when I hear this, the subsidization of that through tax dollars, I get to thinking, why not raise the user fees for those that are not within the city to make it more equitable, at least financially. And I guess I'll direct that toward, again, Mr. Rooker or Ms. Guthrie.
So I think you are right to point out.
Just a consideration, yeah, that we've already talked about. So thank you very much.
Would you like a staff response, President Sims?
Oh, no, yes, please, yes.
There are differential rates. You're right. Those are really nominal, though, in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about typically a rate of $5 extra or $10 extra or $20 extra for a particular program. And I don't mean to sound that I don't think that comes close to the necessary cost. And I don't have a clean analysis of what would be required in order to make. I see that the time has expired.
Yes.
Briefly.
No, I'm sorry. I think I got the gist of it. Thank you very, very much, Mr. Rooker. Do we have any other questions? I see Councilmember Flaherty. This begins second round questions. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to follow up on a point Mr. Rooker just made in response to you, Mr. Sims, about the potential for sewer in the future. And my question is, wouldn't that be true that if the HOA, the community, the neighborhood wanted to come together and develop some sort of force main sewer system that might be a little more expensive, could we not just do that as part of a voluntary annexation in the future? If they made that decision collectively about wanting to pay for sewer, because my understanding is they have to pay for it either way. Well, if they're part of the city, they're going to have to pay for it. We'd have an obligation of some kind if they were willing to, whereas we'd have no technical obligation if they were not part of the city. But if they are not annexed now and want to pursue that sewer in the future, couldn't we extend that to them in exchange for annexation at that time? Am I missing something?
No, I think that's exactly right. An appropriate number of signatures on a voluntary annexation petition or super voluntary petition in exchange for the extension of municipal sewer service somewhere down the road would be possible.
And do you know what those thresholds are actually offhand, percentage-wise of signatures?
So I can tell you for super voluntary annexation, the threshold is 100%. I may have to rely on Steve Unger. I believe it's over 50% for voluntary, but he can confirm that.
Correct, over 50%, but the process for a super voluntary is much shorter. A voluntary is essentially the same process you're going through now.
I'm sorry, this is an issue we largely haven't been considering as part of this super voluntary annexation. Is that an annexation that happens automatically, whether the city wants it or not, or what's the definition there?
Yeah, a super voluntary annexation is where 100% of the property owners sign a petition requesting the annexation. It's a much more expedited process.
Okay.
Still requires an ordinance from the council. And there's actually a process where if the council denies the ordinance, somebody could appeal it and try to force the annexation.
How interesting. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember Flaherty. Councilmember Rollo.
Clarification is the super majority is 100%. Is that the threshold?
Correct.
The threshold?
Correct. Frey. Super
Requires-
voluntary annexation.
Super voluntary is everyone, unanimous.
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. We have any other questions from council members? Okay, seeing none, we will now go to the public for public comment. I will remind everyone that you've been allotted 2 minutes per person for public comment. Please use the raised hand function to indicate that you'd like to speak publicly, or you could send our meeting host a note through chat to again indicate that you wish to be heard in public comment. Mr. Lucas.
Yes, and before I see one hand raised at the moment, I'll just remind folks if you're trying to find the raise hand feature, you can find that under the some folks under the reactions button. Other folks may need to look under the participants tab, or some mobile users may find it under the more option. And for anyone that's called in, I believe you can dial *9 to raise your hand. And as President Sims mentioned, if all of that fails, you're welcome to send a message via chat. And first up is Nikki Williamson, who should be unmuted now.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Can you identify yourself? Yes.
Sure. I'm Nikki Williamson. I'm the president of the Edgewood Hills Homeowners Association. And I just wanted to start by saying thank you again for considering our removal from Area 2 in the city's plans for annexation. Just a couple points of clarification. So as a reminder, Edgewood Hills is a well-established neighborhood that came to be in the late 1950s and early 1960s. When established, it was 2 full miles from the city of Bloomington boundaries. We are not simply an overflow of the city. We have always been a county neighborhood, and that's an important part of our identity. Also, there is no room for expansion within Edgewood Hills or the surrounding areas because of that topography. We sit on 2 ridges. We're surrounded by creeks, 2 creeks, actually to the north and south, and are heavily wooded. That access point that Council Member Volan was talking about of Lori Lane is densely forested on both sides. It actually goes over a creek, and there's no place to put a sidewalk anywhere near Lori Lane. In fact, it is so narrow. I would guess you could not pass 2 school buses together, one heading one direction and the other the opposite down Lori Lane. Finally, I just wanted to say that regarding sewers, when we did a sewer study of our neighborhood, I think it was in 2012, to clarify that pumping station at the lowest level of the neighborhood that would be required would be placed in somebody's front yard. So that would also be very problematic for our neighbors, not to mention the expense. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. What do we have next, Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Maria DeSheva.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nolan Westlink. My wife Maria and my daughter Avery and I moved to Monroe County just over a year ago from a rural town in Japan where I was serving in the Marine Corps. I'm in favor of this amendment and wanted to explain why. So the reason we moved to Edgewood Hills is because it's a rural neighborhood where the houses are on larger lots. There's no streetlights, sidewalks, and we enjoy the peace and quiet that affords. So the neighborhood is separate and distinct from the surrounding neighborhoods. Connection to the city sewer system and other provisions of city amenities are neither feasible nor are they needed. Edgewood Hills is simply not a good target for urbanization because it doesn't offer any developable land, and its residents are happily receiving adequate policing, fire protection, road maintenance, and other services from the county. So there's no benefit for us being annexed. while I understand that the city must grow and change, Edgewood Hills is on the outskirts of the city, and I believe that's where it should stay. I appreciate the chance to speak with you all and for the comprehensive review that you all have undertaken on this proposal.
Thank you for your comments. What do we have next, Mr. Lucas?
Next is the screen name Dano's iPhone.
I'm here.
There you go. Can you identify yourself? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Dan Williamson, and I am the treasurer of the Homeowners Association for Edgewood Hills. And I just a couple of points of clarification. One, some of the city folks had talked about our density being appropriate for urbanization, but or for inclusion in the city. But my understanding is it needs to be more than 3 people per acre, which we're clearly not. And so I just wanted to make sure that I was pointing that out. And also all the land on either side of Lori Lane is owned by private owners. And so in order to take land for sidewalks or for any kind of access, it would require an eminent domain claim. So just wanted to clarify those 2 things. I appreciate your time. I appreciate council's consideration.
Thank you very much for your comments. Who do we have next, Mr. Lucas?
Next up is Josh Boyd.
Hi there. Thanks. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can. Can you identify yourself? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, sir. My name is Josh Boyd. I live in Edgewood Hills. I moved here in 2012, and we are supportive of the amendment to remove Edgewood Hills from Area 2. We are an established neighborhood with no room for residential or commercial growth and do not see any value in being part of the city. I will also combat some of the earlier comments that people are driving into work, as I work in Columbus. My wife works in Indianapolis. We typically do our sports in the county. And when we have done sports in the city, we pay additional fees to facilitate that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments. Do you see anyone else ready, Mr. Lucas?
Yes, next is Christy Duffy.
Hi, this is Christy Duffy. I want to thank you guys so much for taking your time and consideration of our amendment for removal. One of the things that I wanted to bring to your attention, because I've noticed it's a common misconception, is that we often get lumped in with the very new neighborhood of Cedar Crest, which was very recently built off of 446. And it's very common that we get lumped into them, and it's important to note that we share no characteristics with them. They are a new neighborhood with very few trees. They've all signed sewer waivers. We are a very old established neighborhood. None of us have signed sewer waivers. I also wanted to address an earlier question about the importance of 46 versus 446. And for me, that's a really important issue. And I'll kind of share from a personal lens, is that I have 12-year-olds who are old enough to go explore the city on their own now. And from a safety standpoint, have struggled to get to Park Ridge East, which is really close to us technically. But because of the traffic and because of the highways that are right there, they can't yet get themselves there in a way that feels good to them. And that, to me, really kind of speaks to the difference of where we are and where we're located, even though kind of just glancing at us, we do look like we lump in with the Gentry and with Park Ridge and with the rest. We really are closed off in our own topographical world where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Lucas, do we have anyone else that you can see?
Not at this time, no.
Okay, we'll give it just another second or two. Okay, seeing no further public comment. We'll now go back to council for final comments or any other further questions. Council Member Flaherty.
Yes, just a quick clarifying question based on the comments from one of the members of the public. Could the administration confirm my understanding about the density guidance? A, I think that alone is actually not controlling, and B, doesn't the 3 persons per acre guideline apply to annexation areas as a whole, as opposed to any individual neighborhood or set of parcels?
Correct. When you're, and these really come into play when you get into a remonstrance case, but there are urbanization tests, one of which is the 3 person per acre requirement. However, there's also other tests. Again, looking at the area as a whole, you can also look at the percentage of that it's subdivided. If we looked at just Edgewood Hills, it meets the definition of subdivided. So if you were going to annex Edgewood Hills alone, you would be able to satisfy the urbanization test by showing that it's greater than 60% subdivided, for example. But correct, we are looking at it as a whole instead of just individual areas in terms of talking about area 2.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Thank you very much. Still, council, any final comments or other questions? Okay, Councilmember Rosenbarger.
Hi, this is just a question, one more sewer question. I'm sorry if this has been answered already. What percentage, do we know what percentage of current Bloomington residents are on sewer or properties or household, however we measure that? Do we know that?
Michael Rooker, City Attorney. Councilmember Rosenbarger, I do not have that information at my fingertips, and I do not know it off the top of my head. I could inquire with Director Kelson to see if he could provide, if he has that data available to him regarding current municipal residents. It's not 100%, but it's a large percentage. So.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Did I see Councilmember Volan's hand?
Yes, but I was ready to make a comment, not to ask a question.
I don't know. We're in final comments, or others have had a question. So please go ahead with your final comment, please.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. Couple things I just want to say in this very interesting conversation. There's a number of arguments that I've been hearing about those who would oppose annexation that I continue to find not convincing. A small one is the argument that anyone is a county resident that doesn't include the residents of Elm Heights or of Hyde Park or of Highland Village. Everyone in Monroe County is a county resident. I think what people mean to say is non-city residents or non-city neighborhoods. Certainly, I think of this neighborhood currently as a non-city neighborhood, but it's very tempting to say out in the county. But Bloomington was established as the seat of Monroe County in 1818. So I think we still count as the county. And Mr. Smith's argument for the removal of this area could apply to many portions of the proposed annexations. I think that's, it sounds like Mr. Smith would remove significantly more parts of the proposed annexations than just this small one. There have been arguments against annexation because there's no developable land, and there's been arguments against annexation because there's land that's not yet developed. Just because the city wants to annex a certain portion of land does not mean that it necessarily will get developed, let alone that the city will develop it, just that it could be developable. Now, in this case, we're talking about a neighborhood that was developed a long time ago to its maximum extent. It is in very difficult terrain, relatively speaking, for a suburban neighborhood. And I have seen it on multiple occasions, and I can concur that there is very little room to expand without a great deal of engineering. Let's put it that way. And I visited houses on the north side of 46, within half a mile of 446, and have been hesitant to slow down in my car for fear that I would be, or to turn left in, going eastward because of the traffic flow. It's a very heavily traveled highway, again, with few, if any, pedestrian amenities. And so again, that's why I thought that the entrance to Lori Lane really made the difference here, that this neighborhood is, despite appearances, outside the city in more ways than one. Again, it's a close call for me, but that's why I was supportive of this amendment. I'm not sure that I would be supportive of other amendments because there's so many factors going on here that make a difference. The final one being Lori Lane and 46. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. Do we have any other final comments from council? Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, I wanted to sort of think through my reasoning as well, in that it's a close question for me. Again, as Councilmember Boland mentioned, there's a lot of factors weighing in here. I appreciate the administration's perspective, but I don't think I found it really passes muster. The idea that folks outside the city or near the city are benefiting from everyone's, from our amenities in the city is just sort of a truism. But we still have to draw lines. So that's not dispositive to me. And there wasn't a whole lot more offer than that, besides maybe, the level of density or the fact that we could deliver trash service to the area. I do think that whether or not an individual property owner or neighborhood feels like they will benefit more than not by being annexed that's not an appropriate framework for decision making for me as a city council member, looking at the needs of the city as a whole. So looking at individual cost benefit of property owners is not the way I'm thinking about this, or the way I think we should be making decisions in the interest of the city. So I don't really buy into that logic, but a few other things that factor into this for me. There's no contiguity issue. That is, we're not removing any other areas. This is at the edge of a proposed boundary. And I appreciated Mr. Rooker's comment about using roads to sort of create intuitive or logical boundaries. That's the first I'd heard that actually articulated about how this annexation proposal had been developed. Though it makes sense. I remember looking at parts of Area 1A, thinking about properties on the east and west side of a road on the boundary and how they're all essentially pretty rural, and why are the easternmost ones going into the proposal and the western not. And there's some logic there. I think there's a legitimacy to using roads as a boundary, but I guess I find compelling also what Councilmember Boland said about the very extreme difference between State Road 46 and 446, and the fact that I think of the corner of those two roads and 46 east of that corner as quite different in character. And it makes a difference to me that road makes a difference for that reason too. Councilmember Rosenberger asked about what's the difference between this and Gentry East. I think the big one is the lack of sewers and waivers in this proposed amendment area. And I guess I found it satisfying that the answer from Mr. Rooker that if these folks want sewer in the future, they can pay for it. We can pursue voluntary annexation at that time. I don't think this takes that off the table if everyone found it in their mutual interest in the future. So I know I just kind of listed a lot of factors that were weighing into it for me. I think, again, it's a close question, and on balance, I'm going to support the amendment.
Thank you, Councilmember Flaherty. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Yeah, this amendment, it is really a separate area. It's about 2 miles from my house, and it is kind of sequestered over there. And the natural boundaries, 46 for sure, as Councilmember Boland pointed out, 446 really is another natural boundary, and though that area over there is really off to the side. And I realize that the city has to, in their own judgment, draw lines. And hearkening back to what Mr. Flaherty said about what's in the benefit of the city, and I don't know what convincing argument would be. What would be the benefit of the city to include this area I don't know. That doesn't convince me. So I will be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Any other final comments from council? Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes, thank you. I thought it was interesting that the background of this neighborhood, like Ms. Williamson said, it was developed over 50 years ago, in the late 50s, early 60s. And at that time, it was 2 miles from the city. So it's not a neighborhood that kind of is an extension of the city in its historical development. So I think that makes it a little bit different than some of the other areas that are proposed for annexation. Also, the fact that there is only one access point is a factor for me as well, like it is for Mr. Boland, and that it's off of 46 to the east of 446. Does kind of, in my view, put it outside of the kind of sequential development that we've seen sprawling out of the east side of Bloomington. So for these reasons, I think I will be supporting this amendment. But I would respectfully disagree with some of the points that that Councilmember Smith raised, as far as we shouldn't annex them because it doesn't benefit them, or they are self-sufficient and they ought to stay that way. These are arguments that could be applied to many areas in the city, largely because we did extend sewer service to many areas, and so they wouldn't benefit from being annexed because they're already benefiting from sewer. Of course, that's not the case here in Edgewood Hills. And yeah, sure, being self-sufficient is great. And, you know, I think in the case of a neighborhood, you know, they're not hauling their own trash into the dump. They are using private haulers and such. So there's a limit to their self-sufficiency in that way. But so I really do want to single out this neighborhood as one that is, because it is one access point. It has topography that is quite rough, and it's east of 446 off of Highway 46. For these reasons, and because there was no waiver for sewer, I'm going to be supporting this particular amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Do we have any other final comments from council? Councilmember Rosenbarger.
I'll just make a brief comment here. This one has been really hard for me, and I'm really appreciating all these reasons and discussions. I think I'm just like the tiniest bit on the no for this amendment. But I just feel like this can really go both ways, and I think there are good points on both sides of it. Some of this discussion really oddly maybe makes me think of the Broadview neighborhood that has a lot of folks not on sewer and without sidewalks. The difference is a lot of them want to be on sewer and would like sidewalks. So it is definitely a different story, but I don't know. They're in the city, and we have a lot of folks, I think, in the city without sewer and without sidewalks. I'm with some fellow council members that I don't find the argument this doesn't benefit me extremely compelling. I try to think of it as like on the map. I mean, I just stare, like I'm sure all of us are just like staring at these maps a lot, right? This little portion to me just looks like a node that would be included. The one entry point, I understand. I know 46 is a big deal to some folks. I kind of see it as, I think not as big of a deal that they're exiting onto a non-city road. But I mean, the one entry point, I know we're going to talk about Heritage Woods Road too, like that is one. And I know we have a lot of one entry point developments in the city. and most of those are by plan, one entry point for multiple reasons, but I think one is to not have folks driving through and really just have people who live there on that road. That's really neither here nor there. So I'm just like the tiniest. I mean, this for me is like a 51% no. So very, very close, but that's it, I think. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other final comments from Councilmember Rowland?
Yes, just as maybe a compass for my considerations in this process. I'm considering a lot of things, extending city services or actually overextending city services. The likelihood that city services will be able to actually occur at all, increasing probability of sprawl, effect on county finances, all these things and more. But also the desire of those, well, you're not just unstable. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The desire of those to be annexed matters to me as well. So I'd like this to be a cooperative approach. And if a large number of people are not in favor, that will matter in my judgment. So.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other final comments from council? See, Councilmember Boland.
Yes, I wanted to make one quick second comment because I think it's indicative of future considerations for annexation. I think I would have found it more persuasive if the city had included the houses on the north side of State Road 46, all the way out to Long's Landing, which is about 0.7 of a mile from 46 and is directly north of the outermost corner of the proposed area. That if they, I mean, and I understand why they chose the straight line. That's typically how annexations have been done. But as I think Councilor Flaherty pointed out, you know, like it can be kind of weird to see one side of a street get annexed and another side not. I'd rather see the entirety of a street annexed, both sides of the street, properties on both sides. You know, if you're going to go all the way out to a street, if the north side of 46 had also, because there's not rows and rows of housing going north of 46. It's just what's been carved out of the forest north of 46. I think that I might have had a different opinion on this, but seeing, I mean, and again, I don't know how this is going to affect our future decisions, but I know that's something that would have made me think differently about this proposal. That's why I'm supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Boland. Any further comments from council? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a final bite of the apple. I have to agree with Councilmember Piedmont Smith. In her position as self-sufficiency, or that the concept of self-sufficiency is simply just not enough not to be considered for annexation and this process. However, there was enough other discussion with topography, with access, with road structure, with possible sewer infrastructure issues. So there's enough there that I think I can, or I plan to support this amendment. However, I just want to say again, I support Councilmember Piedmont Smith on her apt description of self-sufficiency or lack thereof as we move forward. So we have any other final comments? Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on Ordinance 17-3, Area 2, Amendment 03?
Yes, Councilmember Scambalori.
Yes.
Councilmember Sims.
Yes.
Flaherty.
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
and Rosenbarger.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. That amendment is adopted 8-1. We will
Thank you,
now,
everyone.
thank you. We'll now move to Ordinance 17-2, which is Area 2, Amendment 04. This one is sponsored by Councilmember Smith. Where are we?
We will need a motion.
Councilmember Flaherty, please.
Yes, thank you. Sorry. I just wanted to remind us that we'll need a motion to introduce the amendment.
Yeah,
I will make the motion.
That's
Let's introduce the
sponsor,
amendment.
correct? Like we've done the other two, correct?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure we didn't move into presentation. I wasn't quite sure where things were going. I'll second the motion. Sorry, thank you.
No, thank you. Just stay close to my side. We'll be fine. Thank you very much. Okay, it's been properly moved and second now. Councilmember Smith, would you care to present?
Sure.
If you don't mind, if you give me just a second, I would like to say for the public, this amendment has to do with the removal of identified parcels from the Southeast Bloomington annexation area, south of State Road 46 and east of State Road 446. Thank you. Please proceed, Councilmember Smith.
First of all, let me thank Mr. Lucas for all the work he's done on this and helped me out a lot. So I appreciate that. Heritage Woods contacted me, some of the people in the homeowners association group of people, and they put forth their arguments. And it kind of goes like this. Quite similar to the Edgewood Hills, that they're not dense enough. They maintain their own roads. They actually hire somebody to plow the roads. They all have septics. They all have some recent septics that they have recently put in at, about $18,000. They contract for their own trash. There's no sewer there. And it would be similar to Edgewood Hills, that if they have sewers put in, which is going to be highly unlikely again because of the topography, they're going to have the lift stations and the force valves, as Mr. Ricker had mentioned. They have very limited access to leave the neighborhood. The county police county sheriffs take care of the neighborhood. They're very happy with that. Again, the roads are kind of thin and small. They're not going to have any space for sidewalks. The natural boundary is 446. And as far as the history goes, I'm not sure when they exactly were developed, but they appear to me, I was in both neighborhoods, Edgewood and Heritage Woods, and they look the same, like they were probably developed along the same area, same time period. And so they asked me what they should do. And so they're my neighbors, and I thought, geez, I should help them out. And so I believe they have good argument to be removed, similar to Edgewood Hills. And so I ask you to consider this and have debate and come to some decision on it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Smith. Before we move forward, I would ask the administration if they have a position on this amendment.
Sorry. Thank you, Councilor Sims. Philippa Guthrie, Corporation Counsel. The administration opposes this amendment as well for similar reasons to Edgewood Hills. I do need to point something out though. So originally the thought was to just have an amendment eliminating Heritage Woods Road. If you were to do that, you would cut the continuity. So everything north of that would be no longer contiguous. So hence you see that this is an amendment that has Edgewood Hills, or yes, Edgewood Hills, which you've just removed, Heritage Woods Road, and also the Cedar Springs neighborhood. So
thank you for pointing that out.
yes, the Cedar Springs neighborhood is almost entirely waivered, and they have sewer and water. Heritage Woods Road has water, but not sewer. Again, this is a neighborhood that is adjacent to the city. It's contiguous. They actually maintained at one point, they sent us some information and said that they were not contiguous, but they are, according to the annexation statute. So we believe that this is the kind of neighborhood that should be annexed. It does meet the subdivision requirement, and it is completely developed. They do have a private road, but sanitation, Public Works has looked at it, and it is like other roads that we have already in the city, and they would accept it as part of the city's roads and system, and would provide sanitation, snow removal service, all of the things that they are getting currently from private or the county. We do this in other places in the city with no problem. So we do believe that this should be annexed, and that is our position.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guthrie. Before we go to council comments, Mr. Lucas, yeah, just for my clarification, make sure that I'm clear, and maybe my colleagues, saying that we adopted Amendment 3, should Amendment 4 be adopted? What are the results with regard to the previous amendment we just approved?
Yes, thank you.
Did that make sense? Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused, but okay, thank you.
Yes, as Corporation Counsel Guthrie just explained, Amendment 4 contains all of the area that was just removed via Amendment 3. So you'll see the area included in Amendment 3, and I'm happy to display that on the map if you would like. But Amendment 4 would remove additional area, the Heritage Woods Road properties, as well as the neighborhood to the east of the area you just removed. So this amendment includes all of Amendment 3's area plus some. So Amendment 4, if adopted, would would take effect over Amendment 3. So if Amendment 4 were to fail, Amendment 3 is still in place, and the area you just removed would still be removed. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to council for questions of staff or sponsor. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, thank you to Councilmember Smith and staff for weighing in. Councilmember Smith, could you confirm that the primary motivation with this amendment was to remove Heritage Woods Road from Area 2? Is that right? Seems perhaps he stepped away.
Looks like Councilmember Smith dropped off the meeting.
I will come back to you. Yes. Don't forget your question. Do you have more?
Yeah, I believe I have a question for city staff as well.
Okay, please proceed. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification about the nature of Heritage Woods Road as a private road currently, but that it would be eligible and the city would accept it for providing sanitation services and snow removal. I believe I had heard from some Heritage Woods Road residents that that was not the case, that they would not be receiving sanitation or snow removal services. Can city staff speak to that at all? Was there a misunderstanding? Have you heard that at any point as well over the course of the last few months? Or had that been communicated to you, that concern?
I can say that the residents thought that that was the case. So we checked with Public Works and they went out and viewed it. They already were familiar with it. And they said they would accept it and service it the way they do all the other roads that are in the city. I think one of the points was that it's too narrow for our trucks. And we have a number of roads where the trucks go in and do their work and then back out. And it's just the way we do it when a road is a little bit narrower. There's some very old roads in the city that are narrow. So they would provide all of the services that Public Works provide.
And that would include road maintenance as well there?
Yes.
Potholes, repaving, all that?
Yes.
Do you have any sense of what an annualized cost for those services would be for the road? Or is that just too deep?
Too deep for me, I'll say that.
It's okay if not. I just didn't know if that type of work had been done at that level on this specific road. I think that, I did have one other question for city staff, actually. It was mentioned with both this area and Edgewood Hills, which we just considered, that there is water but not sewer delivered. My understanding is that we pursue those a bit differently, and that water is provided much more extensively outside of city services. Are remonstrance waivers ever pursued in the case of extending water, or how should we as council members, for instance, be considering that differently than we consider sewer in the overall context of factors weighing in on annexation and the services we've provided for folks?
There are only waivers for sewer, and I see Steve Unger is on. He may want to clarify.
Yes, statewide, most communities only require waivers in exchange for sewer service. The statute does contemplate actually that you could require waivers in exchange for water service. There are some old cases that question if that is appropriate or not, but you could require them for water. I think in both cases, sewer and water, what you're dealing with is an area that wouldn't have developed without the city services. So I think the argument can be made that, whether it's sewer or water that was extended to allow a development to occur, it was city services that allowed that development to happen.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry.
That's quite all right. Do we have any further questions from Councilmember Piedmont Smith?
Yes. Are there issues of topography on Heritage Woods Road that would prevent sewer being put in if the residents, asked for it and paid their portion and all that?
So
I'd respond yes.
Oh, could I ask the city staff to respond as well, please?
Sure, and I note that you used the word, this is Michael Rooker, city attorney. I note Councilmember Piedmont Smith that you used the word prevent, and I would disagree with that word. We had engineers from City of Bloomington Utilities go take a look at Heritage Woods Road and do an analysis for us as part of this annexation. Heritage Woods Road is a bit unique. The road sits up more on a ridge line, and then the houses sit down below the road. So the same sort of system we talked about with Edgewood Hills would be necessary here, which is what's called a low pressure force main, where individual property owners would have to pump, there's no other way to say this, pump sewage up to the main underneath Heritage Woods Road. So the system isn't the traditional gravity fed sewer, but it is feasible. It is feasible, it's possible. We are prepared to do it if residents want to sign up for it. The cost estimate from utilities came out to about $24,000 per home to hook onto the sewer. And that sounds like a big price, but I think that's comparable, or very, very much comparable to the cost of installing a new septic system. So that's not, it's not all that different in that way. But yes, so it would be possible, but it would not be a traditional gravity fed sewer system.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any further questions from council members? Councilmember Rollo.
I suppose this is for Mr. Rooker or Ms. Guthrie. We're speaking, Ms. Guthrie, you're describing Heritage Woods Road. If that were taken separately, the area to the north, can't recall what it's called, that has the waivers, essentially the high proportion of waivers, would be excluded because of continuity or contiguous nature of the the proposal. Do you mean to say contiguous with area 2, not contiguous with the city? Is that right?
Well, yes, contiguous. To be annexed, you need to be contiguous with the city boundary as well as your area. So yes, it would be the area 2 contiguous.
So it would be a separate area then? Could be
Yes.
considered a separate area?
Yeah, it would
So
require its own ordinance, which.
Okay, so it could be, it could be explored in terms of its own area. In other words, it doesn't preclude annexing that area if an ordinance were to be fashioned.
In the future, correct.
Yes, yes, everything's in the future, I suppose. It's not going to happen tonight. Go ahead.
Steve Unger ought to.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about, just keep in mind, annexation laws change every year. So there is always risk that the law could change and you would not be able to annex that area in the future.
And just to be clear, when we say in the future, we mean not as part of this annexation effort. It would be a brand new separate annexation effort starting over from the beginning, that whole minimum 6-month, 4-month process from the beginning again.
So council couldn't draft an ordinance to create that as a separate area. You know, because it's not a
process.
Yeah.
Not at this stage in the proceedings, no.
Why is that?
Because it very likely would be impermissible to establish a brand new annexation area at this late stage in the proceedings. Mr. Unger, do you have more comments you want to make?
Well, it's already proposed as one, so it's just it's not contiguous with the area to the south, so it would be just a separate number, I suppose. It's already been proposed to be annexed.
You would need to, similar to what we did with Area 1, once we learned that there were portions of Area 1 that were not contiguous to each other, you would need to carve it out as a separate area, do a separate ordinance, and do a separate fiscal plan.
I'm sorry, Mr. Unger. Yes, your time's up. Do we have any further questions from council? Okay, Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. I would like a continuation of Mr. Unger's explanation to Mr. Rollo's question. I think it's important to understand what's looming in front of us. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, you would. So again, you would need a separate ordinance, a separate fiscal plan. Arguably, we could try to do that at this stage. There is a risk that it could be invalidated because it was carved out so late in the process. I mean, those are the steps I think that we would need to do. We would need to, within this window of 30 to 60 days, create a new ordinance for just that area as a carve out, argue that it was a continuation of the process that we've already started for that area, and do a separate fiscal plan for that area.
All right, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. I have a question for Councilmember Smith, which is that I wanted to confirm that the primary intent of this amendment was to remove Heritage Woods Road from consideration as part of Area 2. Is that right?
Yes, and then upon advice of council, we rolled them together because of the contiguity issue. Easy for you to say. Yeah.
Thank you. And following up on that, the administration has correctly pointed out that this would not only remove Heritage Woods Road and Edgewood Hills, which we have already removed, but also several parcels to the north, including the Cedar Springs neighborhood, which is a bit different in kind, perhaps, in terms of its level of service and remonstrance waivers. Does that bother? How does that weigh for you? Does that, I mean, obviously you still sponsored the amendment and support it. but how do you think that others who may not feel as strongly should weigh a factor like that in this case? Did that make sense? I guess the fact that Cedar Springs is going to be removed undermines the viability or attractiveness of this amendment to me, and I'm wondering if you could convince me otherwise, if that makes any sense.
Actually, looks like we've lost him just for a second.
I'll just keep talking to myself then, and
well,
it's all good.
Hold that spot. You'll have a minute or some odd seconds left when we return. Do we have any other? Well, I guess we need to wait for the sponsor to come back. Do we have any other questions for staff? Okay, Councilmember Boland. Councilmember Rollo, I'll get back to you on the next round. Sir.
I actually didn't have a question.
Boland.
I had just thought that if there were no other questions, we could go to public comment and then have a second round of questions. But I'm happy either way. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm trying to wait for the sponsor. Seeing no other. Councilmember Rollo.
Just a quick question. There are no waivers on Heritage Woods Road, is that correct? Just validating that.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I guess now we will, thank you, Councilmember Boland. We will return to questions, but now we will go to public comment. I will remind the public that you can indicate your desire to speak by using the raised hand function on Zoom. That's either through the participants button or the reactions button, I believe, or you could indicate by using or sending a message through the chat function to our meeting host to indicate your desire to speak. And you will be allowed 2 minutes. Mr. Lucas, also before you go, I will remind the public that this is for amendment number 4 of Ordinance 17-12, has to do with the removal of identified parcels from the Southeast Bloomington Annexation area, south of State Road 46 and east of State Road 446. Okay, Mr. Lucas, who do we have?
Yes, first up is Bart Farrell.
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me, please?
I sure can. Can you identify yourself? You have 2 minutes.
Yes, I am Bart Farrell from Heritage Woods Road. I've had the privilege of speaking to you at a previous meeting. I'll admit I kind of got surprised. I was not aware the city said they would take over our road. In 2017, we were told that was not the case. It would be cost prohibitive. Our road did not meet up city standards. Since this annexation has been resumed from 2017, everything we were told back then should still be in play. I was flat out surprised to hear the city would take over ownership. We have a road association, not a homeowners association, to maintain our own roads. Think about it. We're a mile-long road, 35 homes go nowhere. Where would we fit in the city's priorities to maintain our road if the city was to take ownership? We could get snow in January, we wouldn't be plowed till July. We're just not on your priority list, and we understand that. Self-sufficiency is not a bad thing. I've heard a couple of people say it as if it is, and I would politely disagree. I've heard people comment on us taking advantages of the city's benefits. Yes, we do go into the city. We use the restaurants, the parking garages, we feed the meters. I could go on and on. If you bring us into the city and tax us as much as $2,000 a home, that liquidity that we have to spend money in town goes away. Are these restaurants and other venues going to be as successful if people on the fringe don't have the money to go in and support you? It's just a different side of the coin from what some of you have been stating. And I respect your view, but try to look at it from our side. As far as Cedar Springs goes, I think I heard the city staff say that that could be annexed at a later date. So I'm not sure I'm comfortable with being punished, for lack of a better term, because of where we're located in proximity to an area that has waivers. We have no waivers. We have no intention of ever requesting sewer, not at the cost of $20,000 to $25,000 a home. It's just not something we are looking to accept. Again, I'm kind of surprised to hear that the city's going to take us. I guess that's my biggest takeaway. That is flat out news to me that we were not aware of. And I certainly would like the opportunity to talk to someone about that, because I know personally, I was told in 2017, our road was not up to standards and the city would not accept it because of liability issues if they were to damage our road. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you. You're out of time. Thank you. Who do we have next, Mr. Lucas?
Next is Sally Letzinger.
Good evening. I don't have a prepared statement. My name is Sally Letzinger. I also live on Heritage Woods Road. I just wanted to respond a little bit to some of the discussion that's been happening. I appreciate the thorough discussion. Just a couple of points about trash pickup on our road. In terms of it being narrow is actually not, obviously you can drive down the middle of the road and fit any number of vehicles, but it's a dead end road and there's no turnaround. So for example, school buses stop at the end of our road on 446 on that very, very busy road and let children out and they walk the entire over a mile home on that road. So the shoulder, there really aren't appropriate shoulders for heavy trucks. So they do need to go down the center, and the turning around limits the size of the trucks. So if we're having renovations done or that sort of thing, we have to have trucks offload onto box trucks and bring things in shifts sort of. So that's just one thing if you can visualize the road that way. The other thing about the sewers is obviously it's expensive, but again, I think it was noted that the houses are off of the ridge. The sewer would be up at the road level, and so it require lift stations. And we just moved into this neighborhood a little over 2 years ago, and we have been blown away. Although once I reflect on the name of the road, I haven't been blown away, but that we lose power quite often because of trees dropping on overhead power lines and knocking our power out. So lift stations mean that sewage is not pumped when we lose power. Luckily, we don't lose water because of the water pressure, which is great. So I think Heritage Woods is a great thing except for the trees dropping on the line.
I'm sorry, Ms. Lessinger, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're quite welcome. Do we have anyone else ready, Mr. Lucas?
I don't see any additional requests for comment.
Okay, I think we still had some questions maybe directed at our amendment sponsor. He's back with us. Returning to council, do we have any other questions for our sponsor who is away to internet issues? Councilmember Flaherty.
Sure, I'll try again. Councilmember Smith, if you hadn't heard, my question was related to Cedar Springs, the area north of Heritage Woods Road, and how it would be removed via the intent to remove Heritage Woods Road, which gets to some of the greater or the broader challenges of contiguity and city boundaries, and the fact that you can't treat every parcel or every street individually always. We're looking at a collective whole. You didn't really mention this in your presentation of the amendment, so I wanted to give you the opportunity to expand your reasoning about why that's not problematic to exclude an area that is maybe more logically or obviously, a good area to annex based on sewer service, et cetera, to the north. What are your thoughts?
Thank you, Councilmember Flaherty. I saw that as one big piece. And so it is all continuous and together and separate by the boundaries of 46 and 446. And it did not bother me as far as adding that piece in to remove from the annexation. It really didn't bear on my thoughts on it at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And sorry, one small follow-up. Am I remembering correctly? Did someone mention the cost of septic replacement? You might have in your presentation of somebody having replaced their septic recently, and for some reason the number in my head is $18,000. Did I entirely make that up, or was that said?
No, I think I said that. I believe that was the figure that I was told actually when I met with not Heritage Woods, when I met with some people from Edgewood Hills.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for answering those.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or final comments? I guess we're ready for final comments. I ask call Councilmember Sandberg.
Thank you. I will support this, and here are my reasons. I know there have been a lot of statements, and I appreciate my colleagues for talking about the criteria and the benchmarks and what does allow us to annex and what doesn't, self-sufficiency, whether they want to be annexed or not. But my initial goal when this was first brought to us before the interruption was to pare down what I considered to be a very ambitious proposal. And we were in the process of sitting down with our county colleagues to try to see if we could carve it down and make the whole proposal a little bit more reasonable with respect to both entities, both county interests and the city's interests. And so my desire in this whole process of looking at the amendments is to pare it down. And even though perhaps Cedar Springs does not meet quite the criteria that Heritage Woods and the one that we've already approved does, I think in the grand scheme of things, this is a very big proposal, and I'm looking to make it a little bit smaller of a footprint. And so for that reason, I will be voting yes on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Flaherty.
Thank you. I'm going to vote no on this amendment. I appreciate Councilmember Smith for bringing it and the members of the public who've weighed in, as well as city staff. Like the others, this is a fairly close question to me. I very much appreciate the exercise we've had this evening among council members, clarifying the myriad factors that go into consideration here, which are a little different and weigh a little different for all of us. But it's been really helpful for me to hear all of that. So I appreciate the conversation. The fact that the city will accept the road and provide some level of service matters to me to some extent. That's a change from what I had previously understood or thought from hearing from residents of Heritage Woods Road. So too does the impact on contiguity in the area to the north. This, unlike Edgewood Hills, this is not just on the edge and simply self-contained in its impact. You know, the gentleman who spoke of being punished for this reason, I suppose I wouldn't frame it quite like that, but he's right that proximity and where you're located and what you're near matters to some extent. Of course it does. So I think Councilmember Smith had mentioned 446 is sort of a natural boundary of the city, and I guess that's true currently, but I don't see that as true for the future reach of the city. Certainly Gentry East, I think, east of 446 should be annexed, and that's also meeting that threshold of east of 446. Regarding self-sufficiency, it's not that that's not desirable. Of course, it's a good thing. I guess I would point out that it's largely illusory, and like that we're all part of a broader community, and no one is going to benefit from all the things that our taxes support, sometimes in really meaningful or significant ways. I live in a condo, and like most multifamily dwellings, we don't receive city sanitation services, but through the general fund, I am helping to pay for city sanitation services, and I don't get those. So that just is the nature of a city and how city services work sometimes, and that's inevitable. I think ultimately what's most important to me here is the notion of fairness and equally applying criteria across annexation areas. Unlike Edgewood Hills and unlike what we first considered in Amendment 2, I feel like there are lots of other areas under consideration in this annexation proposal that more or less match the criteria. Heritage Woods Road has. And I have been unable, and my colleagues have been unable to bring additional amendments that, for areas that would all meet those criteria. So I feel like it actually would not be fair for me to support Heritage Woods Road's removal while not supporting the removal of those other areas. I think pursuing this equitably is really important to me. Just a final note that I had actually told a number of Heritage Woods Road residents that I thought I was likely to vote in favor of this amendment initially. And through discussion and learning a few new things about it, I moved the other way. So I'm happy to follow up with those residents if they would like to talk about this more. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other final comments from council members? Council member Scambolery.
Yes, thank you. And I, as do many of my colleagues, I really appreciate this discussion tonight. I'll likely make a more comprehensive statement when we actually take up the ordinances in September, but for the time being, just to explain how I think about this, in general, quite simply, I believe that as cities grow and evolve, it makes perfect sense to annex those areas that are clearly an extension of a city in some way, shape, or form. That includes both land that is already developed, and it could include land that, in our best judgment, will likely be part of our growth in some way. Okay, there are a number of arguments that in and of themselves are not compelling to me. Some I've heard tonight, some I've just heard, or all of us have heard over the last few months. We're not interested in city sidewalks / sewers / parks, therefore we're not part of the city. Again, this is an ecosystem of sorts, not simply a transaction. My taxes will go up and the possible benefits aren't worth it to me personally. It's not worth it to me to have my taxes go up to get trash service or to get a park or what have you. This isn't a transaction, and we can't think of this as thousands of individual transactions. I think we need to think of this as part of a system that makes sense. Another argument, most of us have heard it in one setting or another, annexation, really, it's just a money grab. It's just arbitrary. From what I've seen, and I have had countless conversations with planning and with residents in many neighborhoods, this has been a very deliberate, thoughtful process. There is no just random grabbing of different kinds of parcels. And similarly, I think we need to be just as deliberate and just as surgical when we vote to include or exclude a property. That was the rationale for excluding Edgewood Hills. It was a very surgical amendment, or those 5 parcels. So that's how I tried to think about it. Issues that are compelling to me, okay, what's the history of the neighborhood relative to the evolution of the city? It was very striking to me when a resident referred to part of Edgewood Hills as dating back 50 years, and it was 2 miles from the city at the time. And when someone said, you know, I don't turn left when I come out of Lori Lane, I go to Columbus to work. I also think about the connectivity. How connected is a given area? How quickly and easily and safely can residents or property owners access the whole rest of the city? I also look at the potential and the likelihood that city services will be extended if they're not already in place. So those are the kinds of questions I ask when I think, does this make sense? Heritage Woods Road, I have mixed feelings about. Cedar Springs very clearly seems to exist because Bloomington does. And it seems very much to be an extension. So I will not be supporting this particular amendment as it's currently written.
Thank you, Councilor Scambolery. Do we have any other final comments from council? Okay, going once, Council Member Piedmont Smith.
Yes, I will not be supporting this amendment. I feel strongly that, well, for one thing, Cedar Springs really should be part of the city. It's they all signed waivers, and it's a very new development. It's frankly the streets are so wide, and it's really not very pedestrian friendly. It's the kind of development that I'd like to avoid by having the city take over more of property that is adjacent but not part of the city yet, because we have very good planning standards and a transportation plan, which would not allow such a wide street and would make it more of an urban feel and a feel where it would be not conducive to higher speeds, which a wide street is. Anyway, be that as it may. So Cedar Springs definitely, I think, needs to be annexed. I take to heart what Mr. Unger said about, if we don't annex it now, who knows what the state's going to do? I mean, the state legislature has screwed us over again and again, and especially on annexation. And so I have no faith that we're going to be able to annex anything after this year. So again, just because of Cedar Springs, I would be against this amendment. Now, turning to Heritage Woods Road, again, it is just north of Gentry East. It seems to me part and parcel of our extension to the east. It may be, a narrow road, but we have lots of narrow roads in the city already. It may be a one-way road, and it is an unusually long one-way road, but we do have one-way streets in the city already. So that kind of lack of connectivity is not real convincing to me in this case, because it's east of 446, but there are a lot of other properties that to me seem urban in nature as far as their development, that are just almost as far east, right off of 446. And so this just fits in with that. So I will be voting no on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith. Any other final comments from council members? Councilmember Smith.
Well, I just like to say that my colleagues should probably take a drive up and down Heritage Road, drive up and down Edgewood Hills, and take a look at the similarities there. They kind of look like twins in a way. The area is separate from the city, and people made pretty convincing argument that they felt that way for a long time, and they still feel that way. And so I wanted to bring this forth, and as a representative of those good folks over there, and perhaps before we hit September 15th and vote on the total package, there'll be something else coming forward to work to try to help out Heritage Woods. So of course, I'm going to be supporting the amendment, and thank you all for the great discussion. Really was very illuminating, so thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Any further final comments from my colleagues? Councilmember Scambler.
Yes, thank you. And I'll be very brief, but I meant to say this before, but I want to applaud Councilmember Smith's decision to bring this amendment, because I think the discussion was good and it was responding to some constituents who honestly have concerns and wanted a chance to have the conversation. So the disagreement on the council aside, thank you for bringing it. So.
Thank you. Any final comments from council? Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll on Amendment 4 for Ordinance 17-12, Area 2?
Sorry, my microphone wasn't down. Yes, Councilmember Sims. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Looks like he froze.
Oh, I think I'm back just now. What did I miss?
I just called your name.
No.
Okay. Flaherty,
No.
Piedmont Smith,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volan,
No.
Rosenbarger,
No.
and Scambalori.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Amendment 4 of Ordinance 17-12 fails 3-6-0. Thank you. We will now move to the next amendment of 17-12 for Area 2, Amendment 05. Mr. Lucas, I'm sorry, Mr. Flaherty.
Yes, I was going to offer to sponsor the amendment since it had not yet been sponsored, and also to introduce Amendment 5 of Ordinance 17-12 for adoption.
Okay, thank you. I was going to ask Mr. Lucas if we had a sponsor for that. And since you have volunteered, proceed.
We'll need a second also.
Second.
Unless I missed. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know. Well, thank you. You did that too quick. I missed it. Okay, it's been properly moved in second. Mr. Flaherty, will you please present and or staff?
Yes, I will turn this over to staff to present the amendment.
Thank you.
Steve Unger, again, outside Annexation Council for the city. This amendment adds an impoundment fund to Ordinance 17-12 and also provides for an advisory board with respect to the impoundment fund. Essentially, an impoundment fund captures the net or excess revenue from an annexation area for the first 3 years following annexation to be spent on additional projects or services to the annexation area in excess of those that are outlined in the fiscal plan. So it would have the effect basically of meaning that the city would be revenue neutral in the annex with respect to an annexation area for the first 3 years following the annexation. An impoundment fund is required under the statute when there's 2 requirements or 2 tests. The first is that 60% or more of the parcels are 1 acre or less, and the second is that there's the 3 persons per acre requirement for the annexation area. If both of those are met, then you're required to have an impoundment fund. You'll recall the areas 1B, 1C, 3, 4, and 5, all of their ordinances include impoundment funds based on our review of them back in 2017. Based on our review now, we think that it's appropriate to include them for both areas, Area 2 in the case of this amendment, and then also the amendment to 17-09 for Area 1A. They both satisfy the 60% or more of the parcels in both of those areas are less than 1 acre. With respect to Area 2, I also expect that we'll be able to satisfy the 3 person per acre requirement. And therefore, I think it's appropriate to, ultimately, we're going to be required to have the impoundment fund. So it's appropriate to include it here.
Thank you, Mr. Unger. Do we have any questions from council members for Mr. Unger or the sponsor? Mr. Unger, Councilmember Rollo.
Mr. Unger, does this in any way affect council action regarding modifying the areas by amendment?
Does it? I want to know it doesn't impact the areas themselves, that how we've drawn the areas, and I don't believe that the amendments that have been approved today impact the need or requirement for an impoundment fund. I still think we should include it.
Thank you, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
So I just want to make sure I understand. So the additional property taxes that the city gets from Area 2 that's not expended is collected in a separate fund? What does that mean? It's not expended? Like,
yeah, correct. The revenue, the net revenue, basically that the city would collect from the annexation area, from the particular area, would be captured into a fund. So any revenue exceeding the cost of providing services to the area, the services that are outlined in the fiscal plan, get captured into that special fund. There's then an advisory board that's established that's made up of various appointments, the majority of which are residents of the annexation territory that would advise the council on the expenditure of funds from that area. And they actually have to be expended within 5 years after the effective date of the annexation. So it's a three-year capture has to be expended within 5 years.
so it's any revenues exceeding the costs of providing additional services as outlined in the fiscal plan?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Councilmember Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Unger, will you speak a little bit about the sequence we need to develop or create these prior to us approving annexation?
They have to be, so if the statutory requirements are met, they are required to be included within the annexation ordinance. And that's why we're having you add it to the ordinance here before adoption of the final ordinance.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Okay, if not, I will. Mr. Unger, what is the makeup? And I did receive information, I think all of us councilors did, but what is the makeup of the advisory board in this particular area 2? And how did we arrive at that?
Yeah, so the makeup is, and the language that's included in the amendment tracks the language that's required by the statute. So that board, the makeup of that board is fixed by statute. It is the township trustee of the largest, of the township that has the largest number of residents living within the annexation territory. And I believe that is Perry Township in Area 2. It is one member of the county council that represents the district with the largest number of residents living in the annexation territory. And then it is the city engineer. And then there are 2 citizen members appointed by the mayor who own property or reside within Area 2, and 2 citizen members appointed by the county commissioners who own real property or reside within the annexation territory. So the majority are residents or landowners in the annexation territory.
Okay, thank you. And I hope this is not improper. But as we move to the next amendment, everything that you just said remains the same with the exception of the township trustee and the county council representative.
Correct.
Okay, we'll get to that when we get to that. Thank you very much. Any other questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to public for any public comments on amendment number 5 of ordinance 17-12. That provides for the creation of the Southeast Bloomington Annexation Impoundment Fund and a related Southeast Bloomington Annexation Advisory Board. Mr. Lucas, do we have any takers?
Don't see any at the moment. We'll just remind folks, if you'd like to comment, please use the raise hand function, which you can find either under the reactions tab, the participants tab, or possibly the more tab. And if you're not able to find that button anywhere, please send us a message via chat to let us know you'd like to comment. And at the moment, I'm not seeing any hands go up or messages come in.
Okay, well, thank you for letting the public know how to indicate. they wanted to speak? And seeing none, thank you. We'll now go to council for any final comments on Amendment 5 of Ordinance 17-2. Okay, seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll for Ordinance 17-12, Amendment 5?
Yes, Councilmember Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes. Did you hear me?
there you go. I did. I was actually having a problem with my roll call sheet. My apologies for that. Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Wolin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that motion passes 9-0. Thank you. We'll now move to the final amendment. This is Amendment 2. That's part of Ordinance 17-09, which is Area 1A. Councilmember Flaherty.
Yes, just a note that we'll need to introduce that ordinance first, and I'll go ahead and make that motion. I move that in Ordinance 17-09 be introduced and read by the clerk.
Point of order. Point of order. We have not disposed of 1712. We had to introduce it in order to introduce the amendments.
Correct. So we are not considering a final vote on Ordinance 17-12 tonight. We will consider final votes on all of them on September 14th. So I guess we should move to postpone consideration. Oh, sorry. Thank you. September 15th. Mr. Lucas, would the proper motion be to move to postpone for consideration until September 15th?
Well, if I recall, I don't believe there was a motion to adopt Ordinance 1712 made tonight. I think the motion was to introduce that and put it on the table for discussion for the purpose of considering these amendments. Certainly, if there had been a motion to adopt that ordinance, you would need to postpone. Under statute, you are not able to consider, you're not able to adopt either Ordinance 1712 or 1709 tonight. 30 days has not passed from the date of the public hearing. So by statute, you're not able to adopt either ordinance tonight. I'm not sure if that clarifies. I don't think a motion to postpone is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is that satisfactory, Councilmember Holden?
Do we not? So, okay, the motion is going to be then to introduce 1709. Mr. Flaherty?
That was my intent, yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Yes.
I move we introduce Ordinance 17-09 and have the clerk read the ordinance by title and synopsis only.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and second. Will the clerk please read?
Sorry, we'll want to take a roll call vote on that.
I'm sorry. Will the clerk please call the roll? Couldn't hear you.
Yes, Councilmember Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
and Flaherty.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion passes 9-0. Okay. Are you sponsoring this, Councilmember Flaherty?
Sorry. Well,
I think I need to read first.
Think you need to read first. Well, then I think you do too. Thank you.
Okay. Ordinance 1709, an ordinance of the City of Bloomington, Monroe County, Indiana, annexing territory to the City of Bloomington, placing the same within the corporate boundaries thereof, and making the same a part of the City of Bloomington, Southwest A Bloomington Annexation. The synopsis is as follows. Upon adoption, this ordinance would take various steps necessary for the annexation of the Southwest A Bloomington Annexation area, which is depicted in Exhibit A and attached to this ordinance. In the course of proposing the annexation of this area, the city prepared a written fiscal plan for municipal annexation that describes the proposed provision of both non-capital and capital services to the annexation territory and was adopted via Resolution 1716. The approval of an amendment to the written fiscal plan is scheduled for consideration at a Common Council session on May 19, 2021, with the understanding that the fiscal plan is subject to further amendment as part of the ongoing process of annexation review by the city. The next step in this ongoing process will be the conducting of public hearings on the proposed annexation, which are scheduled for Wednesday, August 4th. Note that at the May 19th regular session, 2021 regular session, the council adopted Amendment 1 to Ordinance 1709, which updated the map, Exhibit A, and legal description, Exhibit B, for Southwest A Bloomington annexation area, and also changed various date references and signature lines to bring the proposed ordinance forward to 2021 so that it could be properly considered by the Common Council.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Flaherty.
Move we adopt Amendment 2 to Ordinance 17-09.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. And you are the sponsor for this as well?
That's correct. Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified that I am sponsoring this amendment.
Okay, thank you. So Mr. Unger will present.
Correct.
Thank you. Please proceed, Mr. Unger.
Thank you again, Steve Unger, outside Annexation Council for the city. This ordinance, again, this amendment to Ordinance 17-09, again, adds an impoundment fund and an advisory board for Area 1A. Again, the same requirements, same language as the other ordinances.
Okay, thank you. We will now move to council for questions. Councilmember Volan.
Yes, just briefly, could we have a recitation of the people who would be on the board for this annexation area?
Yes, it would be, again, the township trustee of the township with the largest number of residents living within the annexation territory, which I believe is Van Buren Township. One member of the county council representing the district with the largest number of residents living within the annexation territory. The city engineer, 2 citizen members to be appointed by the mayor, both of which have to own property or be residents in Area 1A, and 2 citizen members to be appointed by the county commissioners, who also must be residents or own property within Area 1A.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Okay, seeing none, we'll now go to public for public comment. If there's any, and this is on Amendment 2 of Ordinance 17-09, Area 1A. If you intend to speak publicly, please use the raise hand function through Zoom. You can either use it or find it through the participants button or the reactions button. Or I believe if you're on a mobile device, you might be able to use it with *9 to reach that. And if none of those work for you, then please send our meeting host a note through chat indicating you'd like to publicly speak. Mr. Lucas, do we have anyone?
Don't see any requests for comment at the moment.
Okay, thank you. We will now move back to council for any final comments on Amendment 2 for Ordinance 17-09. Okay, going once, going twice. Thank you. Seeing none, are we ready for the question? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That passes 9-0. We will now go on further in the agenda and deal with matters of the council schedule. Mr. Lucas.
Yes, thank you. Just one item related to tonight's discussion. The council currently has a regular session scheduled for September 15th, which is the date that has been selected for you all to vote on the all 8 annexation ordinances as amended. You'll recall each ordinance was amended earlier this year to update the date references and the signature blocks and to bring that forward from 2017. So those changes will be included. Any changes to the maps that were adopted tonight, as well as the impoundment funds that were added, will all be reflected in those ordinances. And September 15th is the date you're scheduled to consider final action on each of them. Rather than conduct the September 15th meeting as a regular session, the council may want to conduct that meeting as a special session so that you all can only consider the annexation proposals and not go through the other agenda items that would typically appear at a regular session. So if that is the council's desire, a member could move to conduct that September 15th meeting as a special session for the purpose of taking final action on the annexation proposals.
Councilmember Flaherty.
I'd be happy to make that motion. I move that the council's September 15th meeting be conducted as a special session starting at 6:30 p.m. rather than a regular session.
Second.
Thank you. It's been properly moved in second. It will take a majority vote to pass. And will the clerk please call the roll?
Yes, Councilmember Sandberg,
Yes.
Rallo,
Yes.
Volin,
Yes.
Rosenberger,
Yes.
Scambalori,
Yes.
Sims,
Yes.
Flaherty,
Yes.
Piedmont Smith,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That motion to hold special session on September 15th at 6:30 p.m. passes 9-0. Mr. Lucas, is there anything else with matters of council schedule?
Thank you. That was the only item. I will just remind everyone there's a regular council meeting tomorrow evening at 6:30 on Zoom.
Thank you. And we will all be there, as I assume you will be as well. I do believe we're in adjournment, or I will take a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
Been properly moved in second. Thank you all. Have a great night. See you tomorrow. Thank you.